Friends, today we are going to study Elizabethan sonnets and sonneteers. So let us begin our discussion. Already you know that in this particular semester we are going to study history of English literature from 1557 to 1660. And today's topic of our discussion is Elizabethan sonnets and sonneteers. So before I begin, let me tell you something about sonnet. Sonnet is a poem of 14 lines. Generally, it is divided into two parts. The first part of 8 lines is called octave, and the remaining 6 lines are called sestate. The sonnet is originated in Italy in the 13th century. So, sonnet is not an English form of literature. It was borrowed from Italy. So if you just look at its origin, Ugama, it originated in Italy in 13th century. Dante, who wrote a number of sonnets to his sweetheart Beatrice, is the first mentionable sonneteer. So the Italian poet Dante, he is supposed to be the first mentionable sonneteer. It is he who wrote sonnets to his sweetheart, to his beloved Prayasi. Her name was Beatrice. But it is Petrarch who is considered to be its real creator. So, sonnet was created by Petrarch. He was also an Italian poet. His sonnets, written in honor of Laura, glorify human love. So the first person who wrote sonnets in honor of Laura was Petrarch. Laura was his beloved, and he wrote sonnets in her honor. And in these sonnets, the writer glorifies Vaibhavi Karisu, human love. So all these sonnets are love sonnets. Now when we come to English literature, the sonnet was introduced in England by Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey. So in 16th century, there were two poets, Sir Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, or the Earl of Surrey. These are the two writers who brought this form of literature from Italy to England. So when we look at these two writers, these writers also have written sonnets to glorify human love. The sonnets written by Watt are characterized by sincerity of passion. Passion means anuraga, utsaha. So when we study Sir Thomas Watt and his sonnets, we see in his sonnets again there is sincerity of passion, pramanikate. Sincerity means pramanikate. So his sonnets are basically love sonnets. Now when we study his sonnets, his rhyme scheme is A, B, B, A, C, D, D, E and E, E. Rhyme means antyaprasa. So if you look at the sonnets written by Sir Thomas Watt, his sonnets have the rhyme scheme A, B, B, A, C, D, D, E, E, E. His introduction of the final couplet was an innovation. So He has made some changes in Petrarchan sonnets. He has introduced the last couplet. Couplet means dvipadi. Now, when we study the Earl of Surrey, he also changed the Petrarchan form and he made it more thoroughly than Sir Thomas Watt. He divided the sonnet into three units, three quatrains, chatushpadi, followed by a rhyming couplet. So, when we study English sonnet, there is a modification, there is a change made by these two writers. When we study the sonnets written by Earl of Surrey, he divided sonnet into three units. There are three quatrains. Quatrain is a stanza of 4 lines. And finally, he introduced a couplet. Couplet means a stanza of 2 lines. So the rhyme scheme is A B A B, C D C D, E F E F, and G G. So when we look at this rhyme scheme, it is actually popularized by William Shakespeare later on, and generally it is known as Shakespearean sonnets. So after Watt and Surrey, the sonnet proper remained forgotten and neglected in England until the publication of Sir Philip Sidney's Astrophel and Stella in 1591. So, sonnet as a form of literature was introduced by Sir Thomas Watt and the Earl of Surrey. Initially, they wrote some sonnets. Later on, it was completely forgotten and neglected by English writers until the publication of Sir Philip Sidney's Astrophel and Stella in 1591. So, it is Sir Philip Sidney who wrote a sequence of sonnets and published these sonnets in his Astrophel and Stella in 1591. Again, we see the revival of sonnet in English literature. Now, Astrophel and Stella is a series of 108 sonnets, and these sonnets were addressed to a lady. Her name is Lady Penelope Devereux, to whom he had been betrothed, engaged, but later she got married to Lord Rich. So Lady Penelope was his beloved, Sir Philip Sidney, and she was engaged, but she did not marry Sir Philip Sidney. Later she got married to Lord Rich. So Astrophel and Stella is a collection of 108 sonnets. Sidney opened the floodgates of Elizabethan sonneteers. The moment these sonnets were published, they were very popular, and immediately a number of other writers started writing sonnets. The next important writer is Edmund Spenser. His Amoretti is a collection of 89 sonnets. It again deals with his courtship with Elizabeth Boyle, who afterwards became his wife. So Edmund Spenser's Amoretti is a collection of 89 sonnets. These sonnets are addressed to a lady. Her name is Elizabeth Boyle. Later on, she became his wife. The other worth mentioning sonneteers of Elizabethan period are Samuel Daniel, Michael Drayton, Henry Constable, and William Shakespeare. Samuel Daniel's sonnet sequence, Delia, was inspired by his lady love, Mary, Countess of Pembroke. So Samuel Daniel has written some sonnets and they were published in his book Delia. Again, these are love sonnets, and these sonnets are addressed to a lady. Her name is Mary. She was Countess of Pembroke. The next important writer who wrote sonnets during this period is Michael Drayton. He published his sonnets in his book Idea Mirror. There were 51 sonnets. Again, these sonnets were written by the writer addressing either Anne or Lucy. The next important writer who wrote sonnets was Henry Constable. He wrote 23 sonnets and they were published in his book Diana. But when we look at Elizabethan sonnets and sonneteers, the most important writer who wrote and made this form very popular was William Shakespeare. Shakespeare is the greatest of the Elizabethan sonneteers. In his sonnets, we come across something interestingly unconventional, asampradaik. Some of his sonnets are addressed not to a woman but to a young man, and they are in terms of warmest affection. So when we look at William Shakespeare's sonnets, he wrote 154 sonnets, and some of his sonnets are not addressed to a woman but they are addressed to a young man, in which we see a lot of affection. Others are written not with adoration but with an air of disillusioned passion to a dark lady. So some of his sonnets are addressed to a young man, and the remaining sonnets are addressed to a dark lady. But we see there is a kind of disillusionment as far as these sonnets are concerned. The writer is disillusioned about love. The sonnets are remarkable for soaring flights of imagination, verbal melody, and the deft use of imagery. Shakespeare's sonnets are very beautiful sonnets because of their soaring flights of imagination. Imagination kalpanikate. Soar means haru. Melekke haru. Melody. Impada Sangita. Imagery means pratime. Deft means churukada. So in his sonnets we see the flights of imagination, kalpanikate. They are very melodious in nature, and the writer has used a lot of imagery very artistically. The images, pratime, are drawn from nature, nisarga. His rhyme scheme is abab, cdcd, efef, and gg. So there are uh, stanzas of 4 lines, 3 stanzas, and there is these 3 stanzas are followed by a couplet. So the Elizabethan sonnet is a strange medley of splendor and dullness. Medley means mixture. Splendor means vaibhava. Dullness means patchu. So Elizabethan sonnet is a mixture of splendor and dullness. Some of the writers who have written these sonnets are very beautiful. Some are very dull in nature. It is only Sidney, Spenser, and Shakespeare who lent glory and beauty to the sonnet. So the worth mentioning sonneteers of this period are Sir Philip Sidney, his Astrophel and Stella, Sir Ed- Edmund Spenser, who wrote Amoretti, and William Shakespeare. They gave English sonnet glory and beauty. So these are some of the most important sonneteers. So in conclusion, we can say that sonnet is not the original form of literature in English. The sonnet originated in Italy. It was Petrarch, the Italian writer, who wrote sonnets. Later on in Italy, Dante, another Italian writer, who wrote sonnets. Sonnet was a very popular form of literature in Italian language, Italian literature, and this form of literature was brought to England by Sir Thomas Wyatt and the Earl of Surrey. Today, sonnet is a very popular form of literature. Even in Kannada literature also, sonnets are written. Sonnet in Kannada, we call it as Sunit. I hope all of you might have understood this. Thank you for watching.